A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with Holly Sullivan of the Connecticut Citizens Defense League. I told you we were going to be talking about the Northeast on yesterday's program. And yes, we will be talking about Connecticut today. Monday, we're going to be talking about what's going on in New York with one of the latest lawsuits taking on one of the many gun control laws in the state. But today, as I said, our attention on Connecticut, where earlier this week, a hours-long hearing held for a number of bills, most of them bad bills aimed at legal gun owners. And as we reported at Bearing Arms, massive opposition of about a little less than 5,000 individuals who submitted written testimony. 4,500 or so were opposed to the gun control bills. There were only about 300 or so in support of Governor Ned Lamont's proposals, including expanding the state's existing ban on so-called assault weapons, establishing more waiting periods for gun purchases, raising the age to purchase a firearm. Actually, no, I think Connecticut may have already done that. It is so hard to keep track of all of the anti-gun legislation that Governor Ned Lamont has proposed. But you know who could do it? Holly Sullivan, head of the Connecticut Citizens Defense League. Had a chance to speak with Holly earlier today about that hearing, about the gun control bills, about the lawsuit that CCDL has filed against the existing ban on modern sporting rifles. Take a look and a listen to this beefy conversation with Holly Sullivan. Holly, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's good talking with you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we've got a lot to talk about. Let's start with the mammoth hearing this week in Connecticut. As I noted, there were almost 5,000 people who submitted written testimony. Based on my count, about 4,500 of them were opposed to the governor's gun control bills. Talk about this hearing and the reception that these gun control bills received.
Yeah, so this was, if you thought Connecticut was already nutty, it's gotten even nuttier. And there's a lot that transpired in the actual hearing that we can chat about, but you are correct. It was well over 4,000 testimonies that our people, CCDL worked so hard to get out there. We were at game dinners and at gun stores, and gun stores were, encouraging customers to speak up and use their voice. So super, super proud of the level of engagement that CCDL was able to really get going in this. And if you notice, there were very, very few in support of the bill. I think it was like 98% of all of the written testimonies were all our folks. So very proud of that. But that being said, it's Connecticut and they have a supermajority on the other side. So despite how much testimony was submitted, of course, these legislators are going to make the decisions that they make. And we hope that we were able to influence that and at least, get to the pieces of it that truly don't make sense, of which there are many. So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, okay. And I want to go back to last year for a second because, Governor Lamont tried this last year. He had a bunch of gun control proposals that ultimately did not get approved, right? And we talked about that at the time, the fantastic work that CCDL members had done in engaging lawmakers and pointing out some of the flaws in these proposals. Do you see is there a different attitude or appetite for gun control among Democrats this year, the type of gun control measures that Lamont wants to see in place?
So Lamont won his reelection in the fall. So where we were in an election year last year, and maybe, some folks were a little cautious with the election coming up as which ways they should go. That bill was largely carved out. So almost all of the actual gun control pieces of his bill last year were omitted, and the final version just included really mostly funding for police gun trafficking, which we're in support of. We want criminals to be, if they're trafficking guns in our state, they should be arrested and prosecuted. This year is a lot different. I think there is a massive appetite in the governor's office However, I'm not certain there's a massive appetite among the people. So one of our local papers, the Waterbury Republican American, did a survey this week and asked people if they think that the pending laws would be effective. And it was overwhelmingly people said, no, they don't think it would be effective. So, I think among the actual constituents, there is not an appetite for it, but there certainly is a very aggressive push in the governor's office, despite what their constituents think.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the interesting things that happened during the hearing, because it wasn't just these gun control bills, right? So the mayors, I guess mayors of Hartford and New Haven, and I guess Lamont is supporting this too, right? Maybe so you can say, look, I'm getting tough on criminals too. They were backing this bill that would increase penalties for repeat offenders, people who had previously been convicted of either using the gun or using a gun to in a shooting, or at least convicted of brandishing a firearm on multiple occasions, right? So we're not talking about first-time offenders. And I thought this was really fascinating, Holly. The bill got a lot of pushback from Senator Gary Winfield, who talked about, listen, there are a lot of people in my district who I represent who may be illegally carrying a gun around, not because they want to go out and commit an armed robbery, but because they live in a dangerous community. And he was afraid that, if this bill gets passed, then those guys are going to get caught up in the law. A couple of the mayors said, listen, if we don't pass this bill, which is aimed at repeat offenders, what's the point of passing all of these other gun control bills that are aimed at, legal gun owners? Now, I would say, Holly, that there's no point anyway, right? It's not either or. But talk, if you can, about Senator Winfield, because it seems like if Senator Winfield is concerned about, targeting repeat violent offenders, there's no way that he could be consistent and support the governor's gun control proposals that are aimed at legal gun owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is shocking to be sitting in that room, a room full of people who have been fingerprinted. They've been background checked. They paid hundreds of dollars to get their permit. They do everything right every time it's asked of them. And then a legislator who is a ranking member on that committee is sitting there and saying, well, I have a lot of people in my community that illegally own firearms, but they're not shooting the place up, so we shouldn't prosecute them. Why is there such a double standard? And that's what's really getting to the core of how bananas it is here in our state, that they're saying, you guys that did everything right, you can lose. You can't even, the part of the bill is you can't even go into a restaurant that serves alcohol anymore. We're going to take away every ability for you to do all of the things that go, that are part of your daily life. But for these people who are breaking the law, we should be lax on them because they haven't shot someone. It's ludicrous. And for us to sit there and hear that, from especially many of us that have been in this fight for a long time, saying crack down on the criminals, we're not the ones committing crimes. Just the possession of a firearm while not being permitted is a crime, and it should be prosecuted.
It is a glaring double standard. Again, you talk about how nutty things are in Connecticut. Is it fair to say that the bill that would focus on repeat offenders is more controversial than the governor's gun control proposals, at least in the state legislature?
Well, I think after this hearing, yes, I wasn't expecting it to be. I actually thought kind of assumed that bill would just kind of move along because it has the support of Democrat mayors throughout our state. So I was very surprised to actually hear that dialogue back and forth. And, I think it's really important, and hopefully the media is starting to pick up some of those inconsistencies and have some critical thinking behind it and say, what are we doing here? So if nothing else, I think it really does further our argument that we need to be consistent. And if we're and to our governor's point, if you're not tough on crime, if you're not tough on guns, you have to be serious about gun offenders, not us.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I think the governor's made it clear that whatever his concerns are about public safety, he views gun ownership as a threat to public safety. He views the Second Amendment not as a right, but as a wrong, and is willing and eager to do anything he can to eradicate that right, even if it's unconstitutional, right? Which brings us to the lawsuits that CCDL has filed. One of the governor's bills would expand the state's existing ban on so-called assault weapons. That ban is currently being challenged by CCDL. What can you tell us? Where is that case, Holly?
Yeah, so it's very slow moving. It's incredibly frustrating. A month ago, I filed a request to a judge for an ex parte restraining order against our governor as well as our commissioner of state police. Generally, something like that would at least be heard relatively quickly. It's been very frustrating that there wasn't a lot of motion on it. We did have a status conference last week, but it's one of those things that unfortunately, even though the court system is what we rely on to fix wrongs, feet are, in my personal opinion, it seems like feet are being dragged to actually move this along. For anybody who doesn't understand the situation here with the pistol braces, Connecticut is the only state that's really affected in the way that we're affected because of the ATF's reclassification around the braces. We cannot come into compliance. We can either be federally compliant or we can become state compliant, but we cannot be both because the definitions are conflicting of one another. So we are truly at an impasse and in a holding pattern because if we cannot file a Form 1, the ATF will not accept Form 1s from Connecticut residents, from what they've said. So we're really stuck. We're either going to break federal law or we're going to break state law. So we're seeking for a judge to grant some relief on that, but that has not happened yet.
Okay. All right. So what's next for the governor's gun bills? There was this, again, hours long hearing, but no vote was taken, right?
Correct. So the way and that's common. That's normally the way the Judiciary Committee works. They have the hearing, they listen to us, and then they're going to go. They're going to go into chambers and they're going to fight it out. So we'll see what pieces of it they say. Okay, this part makes sense. This part doesn't make sense. And the final language of the bill that comes out of the committee may look significantly different than the language that we saw, but that's yet to be seen. And I have to give major kudos to the legislators that sat up there and kind of went, wait, why are we doing this? And is this logical? And is there evidence behind this that this is going to be fixing problems? The harsh reality is we know it doesn't. And there were some really interesting testimonies given that actually attest to that, even from the other side. With when questioned, a lot of the other folks would say, well, I don't know it firsthand, or I read it somewhere, or, actually, we don't have that evidence. So there was a lot that came up in that hearing that's very telling, but it's frustrating because the other side overwhelmingly gets to control the narrative. Our Lieutenant Governor, Susan Beiswitz, held a press conference 2 days ago giving essentially false information to the public about how a person obtains a firearm in this state, and I believe that is absolutely negligent and reckless and instilling fear, particularly in women that have no reason to be afraid of gun owners in this state.
What did the Lieutenant Governor say?
Yeah, it's amazing. They were talking about domestic violence, and I actually was at work all day. Unfortunately, I have a day job. I don't get to do this full time. So I was at work and I got a call from a reporter, and he wanted my feedback on a quote. And I said, well, can you read it to me? And he read me her quote that essentially said that we need waiting periods in Connecticut because a person that's in a heated situation can walk into a gun store and with the right documentation walk out with a gun. So I think the average person at home is thinking, oh my gosh, what do they just need? A driver's license, a passport? Like, what's the right, it seems like nothing. But the harsh reality is, in order to get a permit in the state of Connecticut, it is up to 8 weeks just for your temporary permit. And at that point, you've been background checked, fingerprinted, demonstrated proficiency in live fire, taken the safety class. You're $400 into this. You get your temporary permit. Once you have that temporary permit, you can neither buy a gun nor can you buy ammunition. At that point, you have to go to the state police and you have to apply for your regular permit to carry. And even the same thing with an eligibility certificate, you still have to go through many of the same steps, but instead of going to your local municipality, you go directly to state police. So in every instance here, there's already a built-in waiting period that's 2 months, maybe more. And even at that, you are cleared by Connecticut State Police in every one of these instances. You cannot buy a single round of .22 ammunition. You cannot buy one in this state without being approved by state police first.
That I got to tell you, as a resident of Virginia, that's absolutely insane to me. But again, as you say, it's also incredibly duplicitous for Lieutenant Governor to say, well, you just walk in with the right documentation. That documentation, including the state issued permission slip, right, which takes weeks to obtain, and background checks. But that's the thing, Holly. I mean, if they have to misrepresent what the current law is, right, in order to make the case, well, we need more gun control laws. What does that say about the laws that are already on the books? And what does it say about their mentality towards voters in Connecticut that they can't level with them and they can't be honest with them?
Absolutely. And I think that is a huge conversation that we need to have. And I'm really hoping that our media starts to pick up on that and presenting it for what it is. Be honest with the people. They're smart enough, educated people that can make decisions, and let them express their opinions. And I was very impressed to see that one of our local papers actually did a survey to do that. But it's a shame, especially from, a woman lieutenant governor who's standing there on, women's, International Women's Day and talking to women that is potentially instilling fear in them. You have no more reason to be afraid that, a partner is going to go out and get a gun than anything else, in a car, or to portray it that way is so reckless and so negligent and doing harm to our communities.
Well, and listen, I mean, if the lieutenant governor wants to go there, let's flip the script, right? Let's talk about the victims of domestic violence, those abused who want to escape their abusers, who may have escaped their abusers, but know that those abusers pose a danger to them. Yeah. Under the current law in Connecticut, it sounds like there is no easy way for a woman who has escaped domestic violence to be able to protect herself in case her abusive ex decides to come after her.
Absolutely. So it is an extremely long process, and it's an expensive process. So especially for a woman who may have transitioned out of her housing due to that experience, she likely doesn't have the funds, and more importantly, the time to go through that process. We've talked a lot about, survivors of violence and how a woman in a situation like that, and certainly there are men out there too, but predominantly generally is women that are in a situation that they might need the means to defense relatively quickly. That's not even possible here. So for her to say that someone can just go with the right documentation, you really need to clarify what that documentation is in order to be considered not even informed on it, but just be truthful. It's a lengthy process. So, really doing people a disservice. And really, there should be some means for people to be able to get an expedited avenue to get a permit, but it just doesn't exist here.
You talk about your hope that the media will start to cover these issues more accurately and more fairly. Part of that, I think, is part of the problem is that a lot of the reporters may not understand all of the intricacies of Connecticut's law, so they don't. Their BS meter doesn't get triggered when they hear something like that from the lieutenant governor, whereas it does, trip your alarm bells. Thankfully, at least you had a reporter reach out to you and ask for comment. But how important is it for gun owners and Second Amendment advocates in Connecticut to not just be talking to lawmakers, but to be talking to their friends and family, be talking to their coworkers about what these bills actually do, what the laws already are? It seems like we've got to be sort of our own news outlets to help get the right information out there.
Absolutely. And, I know we've talked through the years about a lot of the initiatives that CCDL has taken on. We have a huge outreach program where we've got, members in various towns around the state that are doing that kind of work and getting out into gun stores. So particularly for new buyers, talking to them about, why they should be engaged in Second Amendment issues, but definitely speaking with people. But I think, this has really opened my eyes that as some of my members have suggested, we need to be doing more media outreach. And I'm looking forward to doing that because we should be getting to a point where we kind of trigger their, oh, wait, what was that meter? Because it doesn't add up. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think for your listeners that aren't in Connecticut, and I think we talk about this every single time, this is coming to your state. It might be here now, but in 10 years, expect it, because these people are leaving in droves, states like Connecticut and New York and California, and they're moving into your communities, and they are going to try this. So have these conversations now. Don't wait until you're in the position that we're in today. Start spreading the good word early, and let people know what, the reality is of lawful gun ownership. And don't wait. Don't think that, you're just going to wait on it until it comes knocking at your door. It'll be there before you know it. And it's insidious. You don't see it until all of a sudden it's in front of your legislature.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. All right, so last question. We'll take it back to those Connecticut gun owners. What is CCDL telling gun owners to do in Connecticut right now? What is your immediate action item for Second Amendment supporters?
So number one, if you're not a member, sign up, ccdl.us. It's free to be a member. Just hit join. If you'd like to be a tiered member, you're welcome to do so, but you do not need to be a paying member in order to be one of us and be included. So most important thing, because that way you get our emails and our action alerts. So when we say it's time to do something, you're being notified to do it. And then the next point is when you get the action alert, please do it. Whatever we're asking of you, I promise is not going to take much of your time. It might be 5 minutes or less. It might be a phone call to your legislator, it might be an email, whatever it is, it's going to be quick and easy. We put all the steps in there. So please sign up so that you get the action alerts. And then when the action alert comes, be ready to do it.
Holly, listen, thank you so much, not only for your time today, but for everything that you do. They were the Connecticut Citizens Defense League defending the Second Amendment in Connecticut. I really appreciate your time. And again, I'm very grateful that we have activists like yourself out there fighting the good fight.
Thank you so much, Cam. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll be talking again very soon. Holly Sullivan joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. I really do appreciate Holly joining me on the program today, as well as all of her efforts and the efforts, again, of thousands of gun owners across the state of Connecticut. I know that it can feel like you're fighting, well, you are fighting an uphill fight, given the Democratic majorities, but your voice matters. Your voice is important. And even if it is disregarded by lawmakers in Hartford, I guarantee you that it is resonating and people are paying attention around the country, for no other reason than to show that, again, the vast majority of folks who care about this issue are opposed to these bills and lawmakers are disregarding what they have to say. Your voice matters. All right, let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Baldwin County, Georgia, where there has been, multiple arrests in the murder of a 10-year-old child, Demarion Byrd, who was shot and killed while sleeping in his bed. Jarrell Antoine Studd, Shamanica Kira Reeves, Charles Jackson, and Rodracia Stevens all arrested on felony murder charges this week. And as WGXA in Mason points out, a quick look at some of these suspects' past stands out. The arrest of Rodracia Stevens, for example, the first person arrested in Byrd's death, stretches over 23 years and more than 60 charges just in Baldwin County, ranging from drugs to armed robbery. WGXA reports that many court documents show that Stevens was given probation, even for some violent offenses, then violated that probation only to be given more probation and or short stays in jail. Yeah. This is, on the one hand, it's not surprising. Right, because we know that, again, the vast majority of felony cases in this country end in plea bargains, end in plea deals. But when you see a situation like this, a guy who's nearly 40 years old, whose entire adult life has been filled with court appearance after court appearance on serious charges, and yet there have been no serious consequences. And now you have a 10-year-old boy killed in his bed as he slept, and this guy allegedly has something to do with it. Yeah. It should make you angry. It should make you upset. Major Brad King, Baldwin County Sheriff's Office, says, it's a little above my pay grade, but criminal justice reform, prison reform, change of the probation and parole system. He said, we really find more times than not we have violent crimes that are attached to people with a lengthy criminal history. And we've asked the same question. How is this person not in prison? He says it's hard when they see criminals to continue to offend time and time again, hurting community members that they swore to protect. He said, quote, this is one of those things that you pray never happens. And yet, it does, time and time again, because the criminal justice system has some real problems. and not just in blue states, in red states too. Georgia's got pretty good gun laws. But if you got a 39-year-old with more than 60 criminal charges spanning 23 years, including serious crimes like armed robbery, and nothing but slaps on the wrist to show for it, yeah, that's a problem. And while I'm glad that Georgia lawmakers aren't trying to address that problem by negating the rights of law-abiding citizens, politicians across the country have some serious work to do when it comes to fighting violent crime. Now, today's armed citizen story, Chicago, Illinois, where a resident of the Dunning neighborhood shot a suspected home burglar. As one local news outlet reports, burglaries up 54% in this particular part of Chicago in 2023. This is also the same part of Chicago, by the way, where an 80-year-old man defended himself against a pair of home invaders back in January. You might remember that story. It was near O'Hare Airport. In this particular case, this was last Sunday. Homeowner shot a suspected burglar in his arm about 1:20 Sunday morning inside the residence there. Homeowner reported that he woke up to the sound of his dog barking. He then called out his son's name, and when no one responded, he grabbed his firearm and started searching his home. He told police when he went to check the basement, his dog ran in front of him and made kind of a noise of distress. That's when he saw a guy in his basement holding a dark object. He told police that he instructed the man not to move, but when the man approached him, he fired one shot. Basement lights reportedly were off during the interaction. The suspect, taken to a local hospital, told officers that, quote, "She told me," whoever that is, "that the side door would be open." Police say that there was no signs of forced entry on the home side door, and it may have been left unlocked. Regardless of the rationale for the suspect, 27-year-old Jeremy Pulfit has been charged with residential burglary. The homeowner not facing any charges. We'll keep our eyes on the story, bringing you more details as they become available. But yes, even in Chicago, you've got more folks who are embracing the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. Finally today, our good deed of the day, Erie, Pennsylvania, West Erie, Pennsylvania, where a good Samaritan in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to help save a stranger from a house fire. Some very scary moments and very serious fire. I mean, there are folks who were taken to the hospital. A lot of folks left homeless as a result of this blaze, but it could have been worse were it not for this Good Samaritan who was just driving by, apparently, when they noticed a woman on the porch of this home who was yelling. A motorist pulled over, and a woman told him that there's somebody trapped on the second floor of this burning home. Donald Sauer, the chief fire inspector for the City of Erie Fire Department, says the guy tried to go into the apartment, got a couple of feet in, and because of the amount of smoke that was in there, he had to leave. So he went down the stairs, he caught his breath, and then said, "I have to try again." So he went back into the smoke and the fire, this time crawling on the floor, following a man's voice. Sauer said he started to feel around, he started to feel the skin on the part of a gentleman's body. When Erie fire crews arrived at the scene, they saw heavy smoke coming from the second floor. Adam Gaddy, captain of the City of Erie Fire Department, said within about 20 minutes or about 10 minutes, we had the fire down. Under control in about 20 minutes. Heavy fire damage to the second floor, water damage on the first floor. That second floor resident listed as critical condition, transported to a local hospital in Pittsburgh, but is alive. The motorist, the Good Samaritan in question, was taken to a local hospital for smoke inhalation. Thankfully, he has been discharged from the hospital. The family that lives on the first floor of the house, physically unharmed, again, although possessions were lost. The two cats that lived with them reportedly rescued as well. And the city's chief fire inspector says that the Good Samaritan may have made all the difference. He said, quote, "It was an unbelievable act that he did." He said, he didn't know the people. He was just driving down the street and he heard someone scream and he ran into the building. So if he wouldn't have gone in there, our guys would have been a couple of minutes trying to get him out. With the smoke that thick in there, a couple of minutes can mean the difference between life or death. So a life-saving moment for this anonymous Good Samaritan. Glad that he has recovered. Glad that he was able to pull that gentleman out of the smoke and the fire. Somehow thanking him for his very good deed doesn't seem quite enough. I hope the city of Erie thanks him officially at some point in the future as well. Now, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. I'm looking forward to being back with you on Monday. Until then, though, make sure you're checking out bearingarms.com. We have you covered on all of the latest segment news and information, and there is a lot to talk about these days. So make sure you visit the website multiple times a day. And if you like what you see, I would encourage you to become a VIP member as well. Just go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership. As I was saying, thanks for showing your support. We're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. News stories and analysis that matter because your support matters too. So thank you again. All right, looking forward to being back with you on Monday and looking forward to writing up all of the latest segment news and information at Bearing Arms. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Until we talk again, be well, be safe, and yes, be free.